Okay, to get things running and our first session underway, I invite Thomas Megner, one of our co-chairs, to start things off. Thank you.
Thank you very much, David. It's so exciting to be here at our third SATE and look at this great group that we've got together. So happy to see you all. Thank you for attending. I know it was a little bit difficult to find the place, but you're all here, and we're going to have an incredible SATE. So we've evolved our approach to curating the SATE over the last 3 years based on feedback from our attendees and from our own observations. In addition to this SATE equals E formula, we've learned that that process is extremely important. Many of you have heard me talk about that over the last 4 years here in China. The process used in this industry is unique, and they have to be supported. The kinds of complex projects and multidisciplinary teams that we use on our projects. So the named a TEA master for project management in 2018. John Lindsay has brought together a group of industry experts to help him drive the topic of our evolving process, streamlining efforts for effective project delivery in today's industry. Please join me in welcoming Mr. and Master John Lindsay. Thank you, John. Okay, wonderful.
There we go. We're making noise. All right. Very good. Well, good morning, everybody.
Good morning.
Well, that's better. So I don't know if it's a great honor to go first or a disaster to go first, but I'll do the best I can. And I feel quite wired up with this in my translation headphones, so a little bit of fumbling might happen. So this is an interesting topic, and it was quite fun doing a little research as I prepared for this topic. A little background first, which is that I was a part of the original TEA up until about 1995, and then I disappeared for a while and did a bunch of projects. And I re-emerged really last fall, and it's just great to see how much that TEA has expanded and grown over the years. In the beginning, when I started to think about this, and how do I make this work here? Where's the slide? Well, that's me up there. That's great. Okay, how do I? Well, there we go. All right. Good. Okay. So basically, in the beginning, as we focused on this, I went back and reflected a little bit on our industry in general, and then brought it forward to today, kind of where we are at. So I'm going to do a little bit of a history piece first, and then I'm going to talk a little bit about the process that was laid out, and then we're going to call up our panel and have a discussion with our panel. So, with that being said, I'm having a hard time here. The green thing is on. There we go. What am I pointing at? Just a moment, please. There we go. All right. Perfect. All right. So everybody says theme parks as we know them today started with Walt. And I think that's quite true. And when the first couple of parks were built, they were built by the studio executives that came across. They were art directors. They were people who made movies. And the first park was built in 1955, and the second park was built in 72. And really, those projects, because they were so far apart, there was no real process at that time. The process that they did it was they got together, and it's as we always said in theater, I got a barn, we can do a show, right? Well, they had a piece of land, and they did a theme park with it as they moved through it. And really, that's how it started. And I think of that group really as the first generation, right? Generation 1. And Generation 1 took us through to Epcot and Tokyo Disneyland. And those two parks those two parks really were the catalysts of the Themed Entertainment Association as you know it today, the themed entertainment industry. And what happened was WED Enterprises at the time grew to over 2,000 people. Everybody knows what WED Enterprises is. It's now Walt Disney Imagineering. And then after those two parks were built, 1,500 people or so went out into the world and started this business. Then there were two really successful projects after that, which was the '84 Olympics and the Vancouver World's Fair. And those two projects really recognized the importance of this industry. And over the next 10 years that happened after that, post Tokyo and Epcot, there was a series of expos and events that happened around the world. And we were all quite busy doing those expos in various places. And also at the same time, there was a series of regional entertainment attractions that were happening. So by the end of the 1980s, early 1990s, it became evident that we really needed an organization that was a professional trade organization. As we know it, for example, American Institute of Architects is the professional trade organization for the architects. We wanted to have a similar thing. And Monty, who you saw before, Monty Lundy, circulated in October of 1991 that sentence up there. And that's what started this all. And really what it says, and let's see if I can do it backwards, to promote the development, growth, and stabilization of organizations who provide unique products, designs, and services to the themed entertainment industry. And then shortly thereafter was the first board of directors that were elected. And that's really where it all started. And then shortly after that, we started the Standards Committee. And the key to that, really what we were looking for, was how do we effectively work together as a group? How do we effectively come together and promote the notion of process and creating standard nomenclature and work together as a team? I love some of the thoughts that were in here. And then broaden our clients' understanding of the creative and production process. So from that point, there were 3 editions of the project development process, or project development guidelines, that were prepared. And I took it through to about 1995, and then Joe McHugh took it at that point as the chair and took it forward. So I know the first document quite well, but the second 2 documents were done by the follow-on group. So from there, what was interesting was at the same time that we were developing these processes, Disney was doing a massive rollout. And when you think about the TEA economic book that was just released, I can't remember what that topic is called, that book, but the top 3 organizations, Disney, Merlin, and Universal, all had expansion about this time. And remember, 95 is the first project development guidelines published. The 3rd edition is in 2007. So you get the same expansion that's going on at the same time, and they're developing their process. Merlin, same thing. Universal, same thing. So you see this huge growth with those top companies, and they've developed their own processes along the time, and their processes are starting to now filter into the industry. And one of the things that was interesting when I pulled out the books and started to ask people about those books, a lot of people said, gee, I didn't know that there was a process that had developed. Or, boy, it was complicated. I didn't understand how that worked. So what is interesting is I stopped to think about what happened after 2007. Why isn't it more adopted? And where is the growth in the world? And the growth in the world was here in Asia. It doubled in that same period of time, which is really interesting because you start to think about the analog of what happened with those top 3 providers and their growth and their process that started to come. And then you look at kind of where the industry is today, and you see that for the first time, 1 billion visits to the top 10 theme park operators. 7% of the world's population went to a theme park. That's pretty extraordinary when you think of it that way. So, when we look at this and think about where that growth was, back in 2007, there was one park in the top 10, one park operator in the top 10. In 2018, this document was just published, as you know, 4, 5, and 6 Chinese operators. There you go. I was thinking about another project. And anyway, so Chinese operators, right, are in slots 4, 5, and 6. So then I started to think, well, when was their expansion period? And that period was in that last decade. So is it really at a time now when you come back and talk about project process and you start talking about its relevance? And as I said, those were the 3 additions that were provided. So once again, working effectively, understanding the entire project development process and nomenclature, improve the way we work together as a team, and broaden our clients' understanding of the creative and production process. That's really the core to this as we move through it. So why is process important? Why do we really care about it? And a lot of people have said to me, it doesn't matter. We get together, people have their own way of doing it, it'll all work together. Process to me is much like, imagine driving a car on the road and there was no process. What would you have? Chaos, right? Pure and simple. But you don't want so much process that you don't get anywhere, right? So you got to have that balance as you look at it. And it's really about finding that roadmap as you start your project and understanding that roadmap together as a group. So I really applaud TEA, the group that did the 3rd edition, because in the 3rd edition they did the roadmap. But this is the roadmap that everybody says is so daunting. I look at that and go, my goodness gracious, how do I ever figure this out? And what I think is incredibly interesting is it was broken down, and when we first did this, we said there are really 4 major phases of a project: the program, the design, the implementation, and the opening. And what these guys did is they then said, okay, there are over 100 plus disciplines in our industry, right? Divisions of work. We need a way to distill that down into something usable. So they distilled it down into 7. So now it starts to break down and you can start to understand it. And what was, to me, when I sort of step back and look at this, I said, well, there are some key moments in this. And the discussion at this point is they drill down into each one of these phases. And if you see this, you start to go, look at how they built it, right? So the first real big milestone, in my view, when I was looking at it, is sort of saying, well, what is the project program? Right? The project program is really, do you have a feasible project of some sort? So it's about researching the intellectual property, concept, preliminary feasibility, investment and capacity, execution. But on the right-hand side here, you see the questions that they're asking as they move through this process. So keep an eye on that as well as it goes. So once you have a feasible project, then they move right along to the next one, which is under master plan, they talk about delivering that project. I love the first one up there. Don't proceed without a complete plan. Really? That's about delivery, right? So, and look at the questions on the side. How do we achieve our success criteria, or our criteria for success? But it's exactly the issues of, do you have an approved program? Scope, schedule, and budget. Concept design, art, story, design. If you have that, you now move to the next phase. And the next phase is really about design. And what was interesting to me when I looked at this one, and Christian, I think you'll find it kind of interesting as well, the project authorization about capitalization there, where you capitalize it so late. But in our market today, we see that happening much earlier, right? We don't capitalize a project at the end of design development. we want to authorize that project and commit the team to the project usually much earlier than that. And that's pushing the big green button that starts the big machine running of the project holistically. Then from there, we get into design. And I love this one at the end. Can the builders and fabricators execute their work based on the documentation? Well, a couple things on this one, yes, right? First thing is, we don't do this anymore. We don't get to the end of the design phase and then go out and tender the work. We fast track it. So that means we're overlapping constantly on this process. And how often do we go out there and issue that first package only to issue a change order to that package the next day, right? We don't want to do that. So can the builders and fabricators execute their work based on our documentation? That's really important. Have you thought it through before you go through that process? And then finally, don't forget the operator. Don't give them the keys the day before they're supposed to open and say, now you figure it out, right? So again, the questions. What still needs to be done, right, as we work through it? So when you think about this, if you really sort of step back for a second, that daunting chart that we started with, it's not so daunting after all. We really have project program, which is feasibility. We have master plan. Can you deliver it? Authorization. When do you really commit the project and the team? Design. Is it buildable? And finally, when do you hand it off to operations? So our group, Infusion, really simplified that process into guarding the vision, because our job in delivering a project is to guard the vision, right? To make sure that that intent that was originally seen by the developer, by the owner, by the creative visionaries, all of that, our job is to deliver it. So it starts with a big idea, and you match it with economics of the practicality of getting the job done. So do you have a site? Do you have the infrastructure to the site? All those pieces work together. And if it's feasible, you go through the first gate. And really the difference between a gate process, and many people have exposed the gates, and I've become a firm believer in the gate process. Gate processes are about alignment, right? Bringing people together, bringing the team together, and making sure that we're doing what we said we were going to do. And that's different than progress reports. You know, monthly progress reports, those are team A is behind team B, we've got a recovery plan, we're mitigating the risk, you know, the usual stuff, right? But a gate is about bringing people together and say, can we proceed to the next level? So if you can, you then go on to gate 2, which is about the master plan, which is marrying the concept and developing the design to a level that you can do all your due diligence. So if you're going to do a project that has proprietary technology, you have to secure that proprietary technology by this point. If you are going to have an IP, you want to secure that IP by this point. Then, if you can deliver the project, if the team agrees they can deliver that project, then you push the big green button that says we can go. From there, design. Is it buildable? You really want to take the team and rally them and bring them together and make sure before that first tender package goes on the street that indeed you have agreed that you can build this project and not issue the change order the next day. And then finally, don't give it to the operator a day before opening, right? Give them some time, because you only get to open it once, and you have to make a great first impression. So it's about timely decisions. So when I went back to Disney, the third time I went back to Disney, I was given the McCleamy curve, and I love the McCleamy curve, so of course I've now adopted it in all of my presentations. So the horizontal axis is time, right? The project as it develops. The vertical axis is effort. So the issue is, over time, the cost of change is significant. It rises over time, that green line. The red line is your ability to impact that cost, right? Your ability to make changes. So in the very beginning, on that bottom left-hand corner, The world is in your hand. You can make any choice you want. You can make all the decisions, and it doesn't really impact the cost. But on the right-hand side, you start to make changes over there, costs a lot of money. So where do you make your decisions? And traditionally, we make them about there, don't we? Right? So where do we want to make decisions? We really want to make decisions over here. And you want to make those decisions in a timely basis against a plan. And the plan has gates, and the gates line up to that decision-making process. So that's our introduction to process. And so from there, we are now going to have our panelists. Panelists, would you please come up and join us? So with that, we have different views. And hopefully you have 3x5 cards. You all have your cards? Wave your cards around. Very good. You all have pencils, pens, something? Write down questions, right? Because there are a really expert bunch of people there. So let's write down some questions. All right. So, but the different views are, Kelly is really looking at it from a design standpoint, Luke from the operation standpoint, Christian really from the economics and feasibility standpoint, and Gigi is doing the full spectrum because his group not only designs but also produces and now operates. So, with that being said, I put that down. I couldn't remember everything, so I had to write something down. So here we go. You ready?
Yes.
We're ready.
And you're all getting your questions out there? Yes? Yes, John. Okay, very good. Very good. This is not that big a house. You can interact here a little bit. All right, I got to pull my glasses out for this.
Quick mic check.
Yeah.
Is the mic on?
I'm good.
Okay. It's working?
You're really good at this. I can see this. I just want you to know Luke wired us all up this morning. Okay, here we go. All right. So panelists, let's focus on gates 1 and 2. Okay?
Sure.
That's when a vision, scope, economics, right, and the implementation strategy all come together. And you remember what gate 1 is? Gate 1 is about feasibility. Gate 2, can you deliver it, right? And when do you make that big commitment as you go through that process? So when you think about this for a second, you've all worked in multiple locations, multiple countries. That's the wonderful thing about what we do. We get to get in airplanes and travel around the world and do all that, which is real fun. Christian, you were in Hong Kong.
That's right. Yep.
And you were there in 2009.
Mm-hmm.
And you have worked with a wide range of developers, right? From the Asian developers such as OCT and Ocean Park. And of course, you've worked with also the big studios, such as Universal and Merlin. How do these two processes, how do they compare and contrast as they move through this?
Right. I think you did a great job, Master John, in setting up the historic overview of TEA with Universal Disney, Merlin, and also in China, OCT, Fantawile, and Chimelong. I fully agree. Alignment is a key word. Very important to stay on track during the planning process of these very high investment projects. I've worked in Asia for 20 years almost. First project in China was with Universal in Beijing, 2001. And as you mentioned, opened the Hong Kong office 10 years ago. In terms of some of the key process issues that I've seen observed in the industry, for China projects, most China projects, if not all, tend to be part of larger destinations, so typically 5 or 10 square kilometers. Very big developments, mixed use, commercial, culture tourism, but typically residential is one of the key drivers. So that impacts some of the decisions up front and the vision from chairman or some of the partners. So most of the Chinese developers come really from the real estate background or government planning side. Mm-hmm. That also has some implications for projects and may not be as experienced in entertainment business or operating attractions. So there's a learning curve there. It also depends, of course, on the sophistication of the client and the developer as well. And in China, most projects are definitely driven by speed to market. That is really a key requirement because you want to secure the land from government, competing with other developers. And culture tourism typically is one of the key components to get the approvals as well from the government. Some of the key clients I've worked with over the years, Universal, Village Roadshow with Luke, Merlin Entertainment. I think they all value analytics, data, and research to help make key business decisions and feasibility of projects. But also in China, OCT, Fenterwile, and Chimelong have really built up their internal tourism institutes or planning divisions. But they also work with a lot of international consultants from the TEA and IAPA as well. So that's part of that process. I would say Wanda in the last 5 or 6 years have also emerged as a major player. Now Sunak with their culture tourism cities, they have 10 or 12 projects and many other in the pipeline. And they've set up a culture tourism institute with experts from concept design, master planning, economics, construction as well, and external consultants from TA many times. And they've also hired from some of the top operators, Hong Kong Disney, other operators, to bring in the internal talent pool. And I think Riverside Group recently with Six Flags, they're doing the same as well. So increasingly, I think Asian or Chinese developers are really valuing the upfront feasibility, concept development planning, because of the high upfront investment in the projects. And also by the government is increasingly a requirement to increase project success by doing the upfront planning in the right way. So a couple of few takeaways I would say would be legacy and sustainability of projects is really key. We have to be able to stand behind these projects for 5, 10, many years in the future. So don't build a tier 1 project in a tier 3 city or 2.5 city. One of the examples we all know about is Wanda Wuhan Indoor Movie Park that had a lot of challenges. It could have worked maybe in another market, in a tier 1 market with some other components, but tough learning curve there for that project. Another point is developers often intuitively think they know the market. Yes, perhaps they do because they're local, but they may not know all the numbers that drive demand, economics, and investment from an industry perspective. And the same applies, I would say, to brands and IP. Very important to find the best partners and markets for their projects. So it's really about fit with the market. That would be my first point.
Thank you. Thank you. That was quite long-winded, quite eloquent.
Okay.
But we're going to have to move along.
Sure.
So I see the clock over there
Right.
as he yells at me for that. Okay, Luke. So you're multicultural, multilingual, right? So you've worked in these different cultures. How do the cultures affect this decision making? We were very pragmatic here with Christian, talking about now they're taking on the economic models, they're thinking about that investment. How does the culture play into this?
Yeah, OK. 其实从我们的角度来说，各个国家的开发商，都希望要投资在可持续项目。那亚太地区的开发商呢，也是跟中国的一样，我们必须注重一个项目的档度可持续性，这个是最关键的点。谢谢。
So that was the opposite extreme. But very good. So from there, let's move on to really talk about what's changed from 2007. And I can't help but to think about technology, right? So I imagine most of the people in the room here have gone over to see the park, and they've seen pirates, and they've seen how technology really has changed that project from a lazy river to now storytelling specifically to the individual, right? As they ride through it. And then somebody was talking about 5G a moment ago, right? The importance of technology on your handheld device. So, Kelly, you've worked in a lot of places, right?
One or two.
In one or two, yeah, exactly. You've seen it from a design standpoint with technology. At the same time, if you go back to that chart says you're going to bid the whole thing at the same time, right? How does technology play into this? How do you get technology to be a part of the creative process, yet do it in a way that you're securing that technology on a timely basis?
It's such a good question because it's such a big challenge right now. Obviously, everyone has all these technology expectations. It's not we use it for storytelling, obviously, but then there's how you're tracking within your park. Your POS systems are different. Everyone wants gameplay. They want to be able to have ways of scoring, and all this has to come back into a single hub. So at that very early stage, when we are planning the project and figuring out what's doable and what's feasible and looking at that schedule, that master schedule, the fact that technology has gotten so much more complex means we are required to have more time on the back end of the project just to integrate that technology in all of these different levels. So that's one piece of it that we have to be better at looking at way up in the front. And we've been working with Village Roadshow recently on operations, tying all that operational technology needs in with our show technology needs, is become a great big hairy monster. But when it comes to the storytelling part, the value of design houses collaborating directly with engineers and those people that are out there thinking up that crazy stuff and getting together and saying, hey, I had this great idea. I think, we've had vendors come into our space saying, yeah, we're kind of on the cusp of coming up with a way to do this a little bit differently. And that goes, oh, that's an interesting idea, because I've got this project that we're now in concept on, and that technology will be ripe 5 years from now when my project's about to open. So let's partner with you. And we bring people in as trade partners. And this is critical, the trust from our clients of having this ability to partner with different teams that can give us those really unique, what we're used to calling e-ticket attractions. It's not for everything, but every park, everyone wants at least one that has never been done before, first time, and you can't just figure it all out and then go to tender. You have to make commitments really early to a bigger team, and that also helps us fast track as well.
So think about that relative to the process we were just talking about a moment ago, right? That you're now integrating earlier into your development cycle. Gigi, so you have worked with American organizations, those design firms. You've started your own company doing design. You've worked with many of the Chinese developers and seen that growth, and now you've grown that business into now operating your own project and built it yourself. And your project took a different view, right? You went with the crazy tractor farm. You looked at that really not from this latest whiz-bang technology, but really about people and about storytelling at the individual level. Tell us about that and why you didn't go after the technology.
Well, this is a good question. I should speak Chinese. Sorry. 这是一个很好的问题。实际上呢，我也是搞技术的，我是那个 Rising Show 的合伙人。刚才在我们的 PPT 里面介绍 ，Rising Show 是 TEA 的第一届的理事会成员。那么到目前为止 ，Rising Show 还有很多先进的一些技术应用于行业的技术。那么我是应该最有理由相信，科技是我们这个行业的一个未来。当我自己在开发我的项目的时候呢，那我选择了另外一个方向，我选择我们做一个农场，我们叫疯狂拖拉机农场。那这个的实际上的来讲的话，并不是说是我是刻意去放弃科技，而是为了这市场的需求。因为我判断目前的市场，中国的目前的这个市场更加需要的是一个自然生态的，就是一个来自自然和生态的。这样的一个热情款待，我们叫 Eco and Nature Hospitality 这样的一个项目。那么这是由我们的经济也好，国家政策也好，或者说是我们这个行业中国的一个发展的历程决定的也好，那这个是有很长的故事去讲。所以我的判断是因为我目前是因为市场的需求，所以我才做了这样的一个项目。
Thank you so much. So let's move in the interest of time. How are we doing on time? There we go. All right. Everybody got their questions up there? Yeah?
How much
All
time
right.
do we have? What's the
42.
answer? Okay.
We're down to 42. I see
Oh,
that.
that's what's left.
And 6 seconds. So can we collect the cards? And I assume you're asking good questions up there, yes? Yes, John, we are. Okay, such enthusiasm in this house. All right, let's go on to gates 3 and 4 as we move through this. So, Gigi, we'll go back to you again. We'll start with you. So we heard earlier the discussion about China and speed to market, right? And the importance of how fast can I get this place open? And a lot of people are focused on that. A lot of developers are focused on that. So tell us about how that affects the design process and the creative process.
这个问题呢，实际上是我们设计公司一直在关注，尤其是我们原来是在国外的设计公司，后来转国内设计公司，面临的很大的一个问题，就是我们很多时候在国外设计公司，很多项目做在前期，后面就没办法在后期，甚至很多的一些项目呢，是因为甲方的开发的速度要求也好，或者是流程也好，国外公司很多都很难再继续去持续下去。那么我理解的呢，实际上是由我们的设计公司没有真正的理解甲方到底要什么，就到底他要做什么，因为没有真的理解。因为刚才Kristen 也讲过，所以一般我们会理解为会有2个原因。第一个原因为了拿地，至于拿完地以后做什么，那是另外一回事情。第2个原因呢，是为了真正做一个可盈利的一个项目，所以我们会根据不同的情况来加速整个的一个流程。如果是为了拿地的话，那么很简单，我们根据它的实际的一个项目情况做一个快速的一个初步思路，包括你的规划内容、投资回报，大概2周的时间就能完成。那么甲方实际上他对这个东西要求，他主要的目的是为了能够启动拿地的流程，倒不是说是为了让你把整个工作会完成的非常的完善，然后去保证他项目的可以真正的可以去落地去实施下去。所以如果我们知道是这个目的，那就2个星期的工作，实际上它就可以启动拿地的流程。那么在后面的第二个部分呢，就是说如果他真的要做一些可盈利的一个项目，就是我们讲一个真正实实在在要去做的可盈利的项目，那我们确确实实要帮助他快速的能够实现这个一个流程，快速的实现流程。因为其实我们知道一般是地产商拿地，所以他的资金需要快速的去实现把它建成一个快速收回，所以是资金的成本比较高。那么在这个过程当中呢，我们会把我们的设计建设的流程给它进行压缩，所以一般我们会选择提前一步完成后面的工作。就比如说我们会在概念设计的时候会完成一部分方案设计的工作，方案设计的工作设计的时候，我们会完成一部分深化设计的工作。那么在这个过程中，我们会甚至会把一些建设方啊、运营方啊，都统统的都给它在这个阶段给它融合进来。一方面呢，我们可以向投资方去展示专业性；另外一方面呢，通过这样的压缩流程，我们可以节约30%的一个时间，包括你后面的这些建设和运营都能够快速的可以跟进上去。那我们自己开发项目的时候，我们会进得更狠一点，因为我们本身我们自己也是这个行业专业，做设计、做建设的这一块，我们也做一些设备的，所以我们一般会把时间压到50%以上。我把所有的流程都穿插在一起，因为刚才John 呢讲了很多的这些，我们应该是一步一步的去实现的时候，那我们可能说这个时候会把它进行更加紧凑、更加压缩的时间，就会把它这个配合度会做得更高。那这样子的话，我们在项目运作的时候，因为你在前期节约了时间，实际上也就最大可能的为开发商节约了成本，那么为后面的盈利创造了机会。这个是两种方式，就是一个是为了拿地的，还有一个是为了实实在在要去做的项目。Is that okay?
Sorry, timing on the translation there. They were catching up. So it's interesting because that's very different than, of course, where the IPs are at, right? The IPs are all about, their brand and brand management and quality is everything. And how do I make sure that my brand is put to the market in the best way? And I want to see that and understand that. So that's very different than the speed to market that you're making reference to about bringing things forward, because it gets about the sequencing conversation. So Kelly, how do you guys deal with that, right? How do you deal with this issue of speed, yet at the same time marrying a brand into it and having the creative process all integrated in a timely basis.
Such a challenge.
I bet.
I know everyone in the room knows that. No, it's so many of the clients that we work with are the developers. When they're doing one of these projects, this is often their first time. You know, they have no history in this, and they know they want IP, but they also don't really comprehend what restrictions come with working with different IPs. And so one of the things we really try to do very early on the process is make sure that everyone, the IP holder and the client's expectations are aligned. If we don't start with that, very clear benchmarking, the client wants to spend this much money, they want to do it this fast, this means this is the level of finish that is going to happen, and is the IP holder going to be satisfied or with that? What are the success factors required by the IP? The other thing is really trying to understand what has been licensed, right? Not every IP has style guides. Not every film property, just because it's you've licensed the name of the film property, doesn't mean you get to license the actors that are in it, or the costumes that are a part of it, or even some of the show sets and things like that. So understanding how much additional design has to happen and what their approval process is going to be, and so that we can educate everyone in the room at the same time, and that becomes, you know, kind of mission critical one when we kick off these IP branded projects.
Thank you for that. And watch out, these are really good questions. I'm trying to sort of sift through them a little bit. So we're going to move along quickly here to Luke. So we're on to gate 3 and 4, as we were talking about. Gate 4 is opening, right? And the importance of getting it right the first time. So talk a little bit about the rush that comes to you as an operator when you get the keys late. What happens to you? Why is it an impact? Is it a problem for you guys, or, you know, what's the importance of all of that, right?
I've never had that happen.
I imagine not. I imagine not.
So I'm going to prove that I speak English as well. I think I guess a common misconception in our industry, certainly with developers that are approaching projects for the first time, and I think it's outlined in the chart up on the screen, is that pre-opening services don't happen from project handover to the soft opening period. I think that's an important point to note. Anywhere from about 20 to 30 months, and again, this is dependent on the scale of the project itself. Our teams, for example, will be working on retail and merchandise planning, and to touch on what Callie just said, sometimes we're even having to develop those brand guidelines in-house for retail items. Our team is working on, for example, the food and beverage menu planning. Without knowing what we plan to serve on our menus, the design team is unable to design out our kitchens. And this kind of goes on, show and entertainment for script writing, rehearsals, etc. This is all part of that pre-opening, and I think that's certainly something that we can inject into the chart, should there be a future edition. To address the, please chime in.
I cannot stress enough how important it is to have your operator involved really early in the process. Everyone likes to think of, oh, let's get it all designed and then we'll figure out the operations. And that costs you time and money, and significant amounts. If they aren't a part of that process, discussing that IT system, discussing back of house needs, figuring out where they want to be storing their costumes and how convenient or inconvenient that is. If you don't have all of that information while we're doing the design, we do the design again when they come on board. So if you are looking to fast track projects, you've got to bring on that operator right after concept, really quite early in schematic as an advisor.
Thanks, Kelly. Yeah, I was just going to address the second half of John's question, which is really what's that most important element in that pre-opening sequence, and I think it has to be the permitting and operational licenses, and that includes the 80-hour cycle testing for some of those larger mechanical devices and attractions.
So I'm multitasking here, guys, so bear with me a little bit, trying to figure out which one of these goes to which. So we've gotten great questions
You can ask
from
a
all
question,
of you.
we'll volunteer.
Yeah, I know.
You don't
I
have
don't
to
know.
always.
Good. Okay, fine. And you don't get to answer this one. Here we go. Intercultural teams, how to build and align for China. That's a good question. I think that I'm going to give this one to Gigi. Gigi, intercultural teams, right? How to build and align for China. You've worked with American companies. You've worked with, I'm sure, other companies from other part of the world, and you've worked with Chinese developers and on Chinese projects. How to bring these teams together? How do you align them? That's the question.
You mean the design form?
No, it's how do you build the team? Multinational teams.
Okay. Should I speak English or Chinese?
Yes, Chinese is. I'm ready.
So who is asking questions? Foreign or Chinese who asks question?
It doesn't matter.
Because okay, I'll speak Chinese easy. 因为这个问题我们通常是考虑刚才谁问的这个问题，有你问的人，所以你考虑的方式是不一样的。如果你是一个中方的公司，然后你要去把这些国际的团队给它融入进来，而你的项目又在中国，那你这个时候就应该是中方取得引导的作用，以外方专家来支持中方的项目。我们其实这么多年来，我原来有在国外的公司，然后我们转自己做，有很多的一些问题的，就是一些我们通常讲的落地不落地啊，文化理解不理解的一些问题。那本身我们就是当地项目，所以应该是以当地的为指导，然后国外的专家在技术上面，包括在一些流程上面，在一些经验上面要给予指导。所以这就是为什么我们需要 TA 的那个操作手册来指导我们的这些项目，或者说是给予一些建议见解，但是一定是以中方为主导的。就是如果说是刚才是我们的中方的要问这个问题，如果说是外方来问这个问题，那其实很多时候我们得换一个思路来讲，就是外国公司为什么很多时候在中国很难在长久的立足下去？回到我刚才的问题，因为你没有真正理解中国的开发商要什么，中国的客人要，中国的市场要什么。我们现在一味的在把一些高科技的东西带进来，因为迪士尼是代表了最高科技的东西，但是是不是我们市场上非得都是高科技呢？我们非得所有的乐园都去建高科技呢？还是说目前我们的真正的这个市场的需求就只有高科技呢？所以我们选择了一些不做高科技的东西。那这也是属于外方的要做跟中方合作，你要了解中方合伙人，要了解中国的市场到底需要什么，到底需要做什么事情。那么你可以通过利用中方合伙人在中国的资源也好，关系也好，或者是我们理解的是中国人善于跟中国人搞关系，就关系这个词是外国人可能很少能够真正能够搞得很好的理解得了。那么这个是你真正要去运作的事情。还最重要的就是你要了解到底中国人要什么。Is that clear?
Good. I like that. That was good. That was good. Okay. All right. So I got a couple of ones and I can't decide which one's next. So Christian, I'm going to ask you this one. So how about Chinese developers evaluating project budgets and the desired effect in tier 3 through 5 cities?
That's a great question. I mean, typically we approach projects from international development standard perspective, cost of development, cost per attendee perspective. And of course, you have to adapt in emerging markets and developing markets into what can actually be built, what's affordable in those locations. So typically we would try to right-size the investment to fit the market. It's really about the vision of the project and how much can you actually afford to invest to fit in the market if you want to have a reasonable return on the project. So there are a number of steps working with design firms and NASA, for example, on cost estimating or other firms to really understand when you translate the international investment numbers into local context. There might be some efficiencies that you can achieve, especially in China, yes.
Kelly, you can even read it. This is addressed
I
to
don't have
you.
my glasses
All
on.
right, fine, I'll read it then. Okay, all right. For Kelly, colon. All right. Can you compare and contrast the variances between process, quote unquote process, for gaming-driven integrated resorts versus theme parks? And it's a two-parter. You want the follow-on?
I feel like I'm on a game show.
Here we
now.
go. The follow-on is, how do you manage an existing branded IP, well-known and protected requirements with a developer's bottom line requirements? It's a good question.
It is.
That's a
Yeah,
very good question.
second one's easier to answer than the first one. What was the first one again? I can't read it.
Oh,
My glasses
all right,
are
fine, fine.
over there.
Kelly colon. Can you compare and contrast the variances between process for gaming-driven integrated resorts versus theme parks?
I mean, the process itself isn't that different. I mean, gaming integrated resorts, you're still looking at IP, you're still looking at, the entire body. You want to look at things holistically. And frankly, we're doing that with theme parks. Right now, a lot of the gaming integrated resorts also have theme parks as a component of them. So we tend to have them follow the same path. I can't say that we have a lot of differences between the two that really leap to mind.
Sorry about that.
What was the second half?
Oh my God, woman.
That's what I'm here for.
There we go. Okay, follow on. How do you manage an existing IP, well-known and protected requirements, with a developer's bottom line requirements?
Well, takes a lot of hand-holding on both sides. It still comes down to trust, right? We need the IP to trust that we are committed to getting, the best product out in front of the guest. And at the same time, we need the client to trust that we're trying to get them best bang for buck. And everything is about that. So it becomes about transparency. And frankly, whenever we're working on these projects, we are as transparent as possible. We typically do take things from concept all the way through opening day so that the client knows that we are making those hard financial decisions as the project evolves, but the client, the IP knows that we're always there to protect their brand. And I spend a lot of time actually almost playing marriage counselor sometimes between the IP and the owner and trying to say, okay, this is how much money we have and this is what the IP wants. We've got to find a way to meet this in the middle. And you just have to do it as openly and frankly as possible. And it means not hiding information and being really upfront with budgets and being really upfront with schedules as well.
All right. I'm going to do a little bit of a breakup here. I'm going to turn to David because this next question is really about the TEA. Is there any online course for project management? I'll do a little bit of a preamble, but that's why I asked you to get a mic for yourself. Okay, so go to the TEA, and the entire project development guidelines are online. And it's quite a lengthy document. It's probably about yay, right? So that big. So it's a lot of pages. There's a lot of detail in it, and it's really quite helpful. But it's a bit overwhelming, and that's why you want to think about how to simplify it. So, TEA, what about it?
Well, I'm going to pass the buck.
Oh, you are?
to the current president. Actually, no, to Jenny.
I'll say that the best resource we have now, other than a full project development guidelines course, is our online YouTube channel, which has content like this from all around the world, from all regions of SATEs and all our summit conferences, so that people could really learn from the experts in the field for at least the last 5 or 6 years. So whether we not have a course. And then we do partner with a number of universities who have delved into coming up with curriculum and programs, not only undergraduate, but graduate programs that invest in this industry and getting the next generation of talent educated into coming into these programs. Christine, could I say more about that, or is that enough? Yeah, it's good.
All right. Luke, I think this next one's for you. So
Sure. Yep.
the reason why I always say that is I know you've been in this part of the world for quite a while. And think about this question not just about the themed entertainment industry, but think about it as your holistic experience in Asia and China in particular.
Sure. Yeah.
The question is, how have you seen the process evolve here in China, good and bad?
Sure. Well, we generally only talk about the bad when we're when we're with our close friends. I think
Over
if I could
cocktails.
make it, yeah.
Stop the cameras
my
rolling.
closest friends today. Lovely. I think I might even make it a little more macro instead of just China focused, and in that way
Please.
we can kind of read in between the lines of the good and the bad. I think the biggest challenge that the most of us have is that we don't speak the language. So I can be in the same shoes as you when we go to Japan, for example. I don't speak Japanese, or in Korea. So I think that's probably the single largest challenge in terms of communication. I think, and actually, John, you and I have talked about this in past. I think as long as you're able to get the party on the opposite side of the table to see from your perspective, and to follow on from what Callie said about transparency, I think that's really how you resolve a lot. In terms of some of the ugly side of things, different countries, and I'm going to lump in Australia and America, as well as the Asia Pacific here. We all have different standards, and that's not to say that one is superior to another standard. That's just to say that there is a different methodology required to sometimes execute on very much those same requirements. For one of our projects in the Asia Pacific area, so I'm going to even lump in Australia there just to make sure I cover my bases. Technically, Australia is Asia Pacific. Is that we were required to use a different method in our operating procedures on some of the back of house items in order to meet the requirements. So we had to retrofit some of the mechanical devices with something in order to appease a different standard. I hope you're following along there.
So, I think what's really interesting about what you said is that, in essence, it's about if you can get the person on the other side of the table to see exactly what you see, right?
Yeah,
You're all going to go to the
absolutely,
same direction. That's the importance of the gates, which is about alignment. Alignment is about mitigating risk. If everybody is aligned, seeing the same thing, going the same direction, and cadence comes with the team. That means the team gets rhythm, right? They come in the morning, they know what they got to do. The worst thing you can do to a team is to disrupt it, right? You want them to feel comfortable that they know where they're going every day. And that's a part of sharing the experience and understanding it together. So
Absolutely.
I totally agree with that one. Okay, we got a few more questions here. But, I'm going to inject. Christian, I didn't ask you my final question over here about we started with you and ended with you. Now, you can't be quite so long-winded on this one. Okay?
I'll do it in Mandarin.
All right. Okay. Thank you. All right. So, one of the things that I think when I reflected on this, you were here in 2009, as we talked about at the very start of this. And if you remember those charts that we had up there in the beginning, and the charts really talked about the expansion process and how that expansion process went. And my question really is, did it go like we thought it was going to go, right? Did it prove out? Because it's a lot of work happening very quickly when you think about that. That's a decade here in China that you go from not being on the top 10 list to slot 4, 5, and 6. That's an extraordinary transformation. Well, how'd it go? What was the crystal ball? How did it look?
Sure. That's a great question. I mean, definitely in the last 10 to 15 years, incredible growth driven by China, by a GDP growth of 8-10% or more, 10 to 15 years. So really fueling the middle class, and that's really the audience for our industry. So that has driven very strong appetite for out-of-home entertainment projects. A lot of planned expansion has also taken place by OCT, Fantawile, and Chimelong, and Wanda. Maybe some of it, yes, it's been too fast, probably. There could have been some time in between certain projects to learn from some of the mistakes or some of the lessons. And some projects have copied the same idea. That's always not good. Kind of overbuilding in certain markets versus other markets. And I mean, chairmen can overshoot, but they can also undershoot projects. So it really begins with that alignment of the vision of the project and the execution with the IP and the brand. Yeah.
So what's interesting is, this question kind of fits into that in some ways, which is design can be an infinite process, right? And at what point can you confidently commit to a design before moving to the next phase of development, right? And so that was why I wanted to put the groundwork out that you had just made reference to, because you do have to pause for a certain extent. And I might answer this one myself.
Please.
So I think it's a little bit about you do have to pause. That's why the gates are so important, right? The gates are moments where you reflect and you make sure that you're in alignment and you make sure that you're all going the same direction. And that's what gives you the confidence. The question is, have you done all your discovery? Because it's the confidence to commit to a design before moving to the next phase, right, of development. You have to have that confidence not only in the design, but in your process, that you have figured out your work plan, that you have figured out your way of delivering this project. That means discovery's behind you, right? You can't go out and say, I was counting on this whiz-bang technology, and I didn't bother to secure a relationship with that vendor before I went and committed to the project. And that vendor, lo and behold, somebody else was chasing him, and maybe they got committed to somebody else, right? So you really have to do all versions of discovery before you go and really commit to a project. And that's really critical to this. And that's why the gate process is important. And only once you get to that second gate do you commit to the project. And so it's about pacing your energy and expenses so that when you get to that moment in time, then you commit the team and you do it in a timely basis.
At the same time, right, that word commit is, it does, we have had some situations where the client wants to just keep designing and noodling. And frankly, you can keep changing a plan and massaging a plan for years, right? So where we all struggle is when we're told we want this really fast, but we never want to lock the plan. And so I agree with you. It's finding these moments where your client, who might not have done this as much as we have, has the comfort of being able to say, I'm going to trust this is right for me. And yes, it may evolve a little bit, but you do have to have these moments where you say, okay, we're all going to agree this is locked so we can keep moving forward. Otherwise, we just keep spiraling and we don't accomplish.
And that's about it. Once you agree on your game plan, once you agree on your development process, stick to it. Right? Mature it.
Absolutely.
All right? And go back when you lose your way, because every project loses its way at some point, go back to what your original commitments were to each other, right? And reground the team, right? And that will keep you steady as you move through it. Okay, we are now in China. I didn't realize that. No, just kidding. What are the challenges and the difficulties to work with local Chinese developers, investors, contractors, and operators? Gigi, I think I'm going to ask you that question. You want me to say it again so that I caught you off guard by not telling you first?
We have enough time to say that?
You have 11 minutes and 34 seconds. But save some time because I want to do a wrap at the end here.
It's a big question.
It is a big question.
So there are too many things you need to go to one by one. And anyway,
Whoops.
so maybe just quickly English, so you don't need to switch that. Okay. Because you are leading Disney project, right? You like Shanghai Disney, you know that's the top. I'm doing my farm project. That's a very, very low cost and low investment and low operation fees. So if we want to compare that can answer the questions. But shall we have 5 hours?
5 hours to compare the question.
So actually, I don't know how to really answer right now. There are too many things to say about that.
Anybody else want to try on this one? No? You do? Or are you waving your head? Nope. Okay, all right. I think it's a good question.
No, it is a good question, and I mean, it is full of challenges. There's, I think, going back to what we were saying before about transparency, it can be very challenging, the transparency here, because there is, when you live here and you're working in this environment all the time, you do become very acutely aware of how important the government authorizations are. And just like you have these gates we're talking about, we have a whole nother set of gates that Gigi also talked about early on in the session day that have to go in parallel. And they don't always actually match up. And we're having to adjust our process a little bit, and from a design standpoint, our expectations of what happens in certain moments of time, because we have to match up to how we can work with the government and get the right approvals. And it is different. And it's kind of exciting once you start to kind of learn the rhythm and get into the rhythm. It is a different rhythm. And then the more you learn about it, the easier it becomes, because you're like, okay, I get this. I've been down this path before. And I'm really looking forward to your last question, because I'm so ready for that one. Because this is kind of part of that. This localization becomes so important. So it is to really work well, in my personal opinion, with Chinese developers, is to be as localized as possible. You have to have a team that's on the ground here. It can't just be done overseas. You have to be able to understand the culture a little bit better, and you have to be able to connect with these standards and processes and figure out how to mesh them all together with what we're trying to do at the same time. And ultimately, that was how we will get successful projects in China.
John, I might just take it in
Please.
Mandarin and summarize a 5-hour session in. 其实我们觉得这个问题问得非常好，也是我可以简单回答的问题。这个最大的问题是不切实际的期望，这个包含不切实际的预算和不切实际的里程碑节点。
So, which really ties to this next question, right? Which is compare Chinese local companies, Western companies are more expensive. This is trying to monetize, a metric on basically talent. And I would say to you that you don't focus on the hourly rate, right? Focus on the level of expertise and the marrying of the expertise. right? Because a great team is an integrated team. And a great team is one that recognizes talents at different places and how you orchestrate those and bring them together. And too often people think, oh, I just look at the bottom line of hours and dollars and unit rate and try and attach it that way. Both are more expensive at different times, be frank with you, right? Because if you have done this often and you're efficient at what you do, your unit rate might be higher than somebody who is not as efficient. Or there may be change orders later caused because it's not a complete holistic service that's put forward.
Just because
So-
you saved money on design
Doesn't mean-
can mean
right.
it can cost you twice that in construction.
So I think this is,
Yeah, so
be careful with that one. Okay, with 6 minutes left and 20 seconds. No long-winded speeches here. You all get about a minute each, okay? What would you say to that process chart? What would you say to that process chart as sort of your key input to how to think about all the things we've discussed going forward? Gigi, we'll start with you and we'll just simply go down the path here.
OK，我刚才这个是关于这个流程的，其实刚才因为肉哥也讲了，是因为提到刚才的问题的时候，中国开发者有一些很多不切实际的一些想法或者问题，但是这个其实我是持不同意见的。为什么我会认为是？为什么我会怎么想的是？那你为什么不想一下为什么呢？为什么中国开发商会提有不切实际的预算、不切实际的流程、不切实际的要求？你还是我会认为你没有真的了解中国的需求到底是什么。开发商都是很厉害的，能够赚多少亿的这些地层，难道他不知道怎么去实际或者不切实际吗？但是还是肯定有很多的一些问题。Sorry， 对，所以说我说刚才再回到中国关于这个 process 跟流程的问题，那么这也是我是想的跟 TA 有讲的问题。这流程是非常非常的好，但是我花了15年的职业生涯没有看完，因为东西是太多了，而且很多东西它并没有完完整整的能够跟中国的现实的项目开发是能够结合的在一起的，因为我们实际上的开发它并不是跟美国一样的是从零开始的，我们是从拷贝美国的项目到中国来开始的。所以我们的流程不能完全是按照这个流程的，而且我们的很多现在的一些现实情况，很多不切实际的现实情况，那么其实都希望从那个手册里面去得到一些解决方案。那为什么不切实际？首先，如果说他能够真正的如果懂那个手册，如果很简单的，不要这么厚，只要这么厚，能够把整个的一个流程都看一遍，很了解清楚，那么也许他不会去问不切实际的问题了。所以我觉得还是给建议，就是能不能把这个流程还有手册，能再简化，结合中国的实际情况去做一个 make a Chinese vision。
That's good. That's good.
And make it well balanced, right? That's really the point. Christian.
Yeah, I would say I think it's a great resource for the industry from TA with the planning process early on for clients inexperienced with the industry to understand some of the key steps. I like the way you have done it, John. Keep it very focused, integrate 7 phases into 4 steps, easy to understand. And because I approach things more from the market demand perspective, I would say be realistic with the expectations, be data and analytics driven and in line with the market. That would be some advice I would give.
So in addition to some of those comments I made earlier about operational pre-opening starts well before, I think there needs to be a section in the in this new edition on the planning fallacy, and I think there's a renowned project in Australia which is close to home, certainly for me, which was the Sydney Opera House. It was estimated to complete in 1963 at a capex level of $7 million. It ended up completing in 1973 at a cost of just a shade over $100 million. It was $102 million to wrap up. So it's 14 times the budget and a decade behind schedule. And there's actually a really good study out there by the University of Oxford, which is on cost overruns of Olympic Games since 1976. And I think there is certainly something that we can do in our industry, taking some of the more recently completed projects as a great, compelling cautionary tale for our industry.
It's an interesting statement. It's almost a question of, when you go back and look at the chart, that chart really assumes that you're going very linear.
Absolutely.
And we're in a non-linear environment now, right? And that's what proves out on these things.
Yeah, and I think that there's just not enough of an education process up front to help people understand it. There
And
is
to
such a
manage
thing called
expectations.
planning
Right.
fallacy.
Yeah, yeah, well said. Kelly?
I think we need to do some localization, not just. China is a huge market. We have so much going on here. So is the UAE. The UAE, we're using REBA standards. We aren't using REBA here in China. We're using BIM almost exclusively in the UAE. Only a little bit here in China. Very rarely. We aren't there at this point in time. There are things that are, and then you have just government processes there, different from government processes here, which is different from what you find in the United States and things like that. I'd like to see the next iteration have sections that address some of the differences of working in these different cultures from a process standpoint that impact the process, because we have to acknowledge the fact that yes, this is a great little streamline. If we were in a perfect world, this is how it would work. But I'm now in a different world, and these are the things that we all have to be aware of. And back to the transparency between us and our client, it needs to be a document that works for both parties and kind of helps both of them come to the table better, and in their own language.
Yeah.
Well said.
Yeah.
I think sort of summarizing this in the 10 seconds to go, which is very simple. If you can distill it down, your process, really distill it down, and get your pacing milestones figured out, those are your gates.
Yeah.
And then think about these core things. Why are you doing this, right? That's your vision. Why? What is it? That's your scope. How are you doing it, right? That's your delivery process, right? And then finally, what is the protocol for communicating BIM, REBA, blah, 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 right? That's the key to success as you move through this process. And if you lay that out, I think you'll find your team will be integrated and excited and energized and move in an efficient manner. There you go.
Thanks, John. Thank you.
Thanks, John.
Thank you.
Thank you.